Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session called Pilgrimage of Privilege, Exploring Historical Conflict. My name is Keith Patterson. I'm the Associate Director of the Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region.
My name is Kile. I'm the project coordinator, and I also teach in the journalism department at MSU of Denver.
Hello, I'm Roland Schendel. I'm an associate professor of elementary education and literacy at MSU of Denver.
And before we get started, I just want everyone to take note of that bit.ly link down there, TPSCC-IRA 2021, all in capitals. We'd recommend that you just pause here and type that in real quick and grab this resource. That will link you out to a folder. Find this presentation. We're doing a couple of CCRA presentations, but find this particular presentation, as it will be helpful to have a copy of it, as well as links and notes to what we're doing today, because we're going to be doing some hands-on exercises and things, and it would be helpful to have a copy of it to work from. With that, again, we're working with the Library of Congress Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region. We are based out of Metropolitan State University in Denver. We'll repeat this again, but that's our contact information and our Twitter. Feel free to reach out to us. All of our information is there. And just as a bit of background of where we're coming from in our organization, the Teaching with Primary Sources program is actually based on a grant from the Library of Congress. There on the slide is a picture of the Jefferson Building in Washington, D.C. Our organization is created to support teachers in the use of the resources of the Library of Congress. And really we do that in two ways. One is really just raising awareness of the resources, the millions of things that they've digitized and put up on that website, the loc.gov. We're not going to dig into that terribly far today, but we are going to mention that everything we're working with today pretty much is related to materials you can access at the Library of Congress, and we'll provide links to those so you can grab them. We do this work, this is our work, is to support teachers. So if you'd like to learn more about how to access these and other materials at the Library of Congress, please contact us. Today we're really focusing in on a particular content area, but would be happy to talk to you. The other big thing we really do is just how to use those materials effectively in the classroom. And that's really what we're talking more about today is the effective use of these, and really talking about how to discuss conversations of privilege through the use of primary sources and using all the wonderful inquiry strategies that we can access through that. Before we kind of proceed into the content, I just want to give a little background if you don't know much about the Library of Congress. Really, the Library of Congress was really established right at the beginning of our country with the mission really to provide Congress with the best information possible, so they'd have all the information they need to make laws for our country. Really at the same time that they became the nation's library. So through the years, they've collected lots of information, and really that's become the nation's library and the largest library in the world. Some of the information in 1815, they actually purchased Thomas Jefferson's book, which has become the foundation of the modern Library of Congress. His collections are still on display at the Jefferson Building in DC. And as it says there, today there's over 170 million items at the Library of Congress in their physical collections. But what we really want to make you aware of is that the digital collections, which are available at loc.gov, there are over 60 million things available for access there. And you can see that it includes a whole bunch of things, not just books. It has manuscripts, the books we mentioned, visual materials, sheet music, maps, audio items, moving images, and many, many other things that you can access for your classroom online at loc.gov. One last thing before we move on, I just want to mention that we are a program that does educational outreach for the library. We are one of 3 regional centers in the country. We actually deal with the Western United States and have counterparts in the Midwest and Eastern region. You can learn more about that program at loc.gov/teachers, and then look for the TPS program. The big thing here is that we do this sort of work through grant projects up to $20,000 with organizations who are interested in integrating the materials of the Library of Congress into the curriculum of their and other educational initiatives of their organizations. So if your school district or your school or your organization would be interested in doing things of this nature, please reach out and talk to us, because we are here to help and can really help these things occur by doing these grant projects. And we'd be happy to talk more about that. And with that, really our agenda for today is we're just going to cover a couple of high points and discuss and kind of give you some gateways into this conversation. One, we're going to talk a little bit about historical thinking and media literacy really as a starting point for our conversations today. Then we're going to really delve into some primary source analysis, which is very foundational for the work we do, working with the primary sources that are available at the Library of Congress. So basically, we're just going to be doing a mystery photo, which is a way to really learn how to do a primary source analysis. Then we're going to go into a very interesting protocol called levels of listening, where we're going to be listening to some poetry that's in the collections at the Library of Congress to access some different ways to digest different kinds of media. We're then going to take some different looks at that poetry by breaking it down and doing some found poetry exercises and some sentence phrase word exercises. And then really at the end, we're going to bring all that together and do some reflection and extension, as any good inquiry presentation or exercise should be done. We're really going to talk about the reflection and then taking that next step in inquiry by finding ways to bring it into your classroom when you go back on Monday or whenever you're going back. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who's going to kind of delve into this media literacy and historical thinking talk.
Sure. So this is just a kind of a reminder that media and the media are different things. And when we're talking about media literacy, we're talking about media as a plural. So meaning media as some way that somebody is communicating or expressing their thoughts to another person. The media, on the other hand, the media is the media that we know so well today about broadcasting, publishing. So those are specific media types. That was just a quick distinction. So the TBS program really has this critical thinking and historical thinking and understanding what is fact and fiction, sussing through all the bias and perspective of historical documents. The left image we can obviously see is real. Lincoln likely didn't have an iPhone. The image on the right is of Ulysses S. Grant. But if you go to the next slide, you can tell that this one isn't real either. So this one is a composite of 3 different photographs. And the only thing that you actually really see of Ulysses S. Grant is his face. The rest of it is basically, you know, somebody took a razor to the horse and body and then put it on top of the background and then stuck Ulysses S. Grant, his face on there. And, you know, it could be for propaganda reasons. It could be for all sorts of different reasons. But that's the purpose of the journey of primary source analysis. So this next slide, when we're talking about historical thinking, we're really talking about these 5 aspects. And this comes from the Stanford History Education Group. Their website is listed in the presentation, but it's sheg, sheg.stanford.edu. They have tons of amazing historical assessments, civic online reasoning, just a bunch of really great resources for teaching with primary sources. And so it hinges on these 5 aspects, considering multiple accounts and perspectives, really analyzing and reconstructing primary sources, sourcing it. So not just where does it come from, but also who, what, when, where, why, and how it was created, those kind of things. Understanding the historical context is all about the ideologies of before and after and during. And then connecting that with the claim evidence connection. So understanding that all the claims you make about whether it's history or anything needs to be backed up by evidence, even if those historical accounts come in shades of gray sometimes. So that next slide, these are some prompts for historical thinking that just can help your students kind of think in these different areas. And then, so the next slide is the media literacy slide. And I just kind of wanted to show this to highlight that critical media literacy from Douglas Kellner and Jeff Scher is really these ideas, these concepts that fit really well with historical thinking. So we're talking about messages being constructed. We're talking about construction as a creative language with its own rules. So symbols and compositional makeup and things like that. Audience decoding. So that's all about how are different people going to interpret it? What is the audience of the message? How will different audience members interpret that message? So that next part is the content and message. This is all, where is it coming from? So the points of view and the embedded values within the content. And then the motivation is all about the, where is the motivation for making this primary source. And historically, that's a really important thing to consider, especially when we think about like drawings or political cartoons, where everything is sort of made for a reason. So if we keep going, that next slide, we'll show you some good prompts or questions for these critical media literacy concepts that you can give your students. And then that next slide is just a comparison of both, and showing you that they really complement each other, and they're supplemental to each other, and help you kind of build these connections between cross-curricular subject areas as well. So if you think about historical thinking and media literacy, the scientific method, close reading, those are all the same kind of protocols that we're really getting to the essence of the source that we're looking at. So we can go to the next one, and this is our foundational primary source analysis tool. So you may have seen this before, and if you don't know where it's at, you can search Library of Congress primary source analysis tool in Google. It'll be the first thing that comes up. But basically, it's this 3-step process, and the steps don't have to be done in order, mind you, but it's what do you see, what do you think you know, and what do you wonder. So we're looking at 3 different sections to help really compartmentalize our thinking and dig into the details of primary sources rather than jumping to conclusions about it on first sight. Raleigh, did you have anything else to say about this?
Yeah, you know, there are many ways to look at this analysis tool, and I would, piggyback on what Kyle said about, not focusing on working with it in terms of this piece first, this piece next, and this piece last. Really mess with the order of this. Also mess with the pacing of the use of this. So you might use this to work with students over a series of days. You might let this just drip by over multiple weeks, and really mess with the engagement level of learners with respect to a particular set of primary sources or an individual image, recording, text, whatever you're using to help teach and help them learn. Another thing you might think about is that whether you're really familiar with this or it's brand new to you, this is what's necessary in terms of scaffolding and sheltered instruction to promote language access for English language learners. And you think about capitalizing on their skills and their strengths and focusing on just what they see. And later on, you'll see it's just what they hear. So what are the finite pieces? What are the little bits of the puzzle that they can put together and add to the learning experience and feel like their role is further established and they actually have capital, so to speak, in that learning environment? Also, what you might want to consider is that this is a powerful opportunity for you to see what kind of learners you have in your classroom, whether remote or in face-to-face in a four-walled room. What kind of thinkers are they? Do they just jump to conclusions, and or how do they jump to those conclusions? Or do they not quite get to the conclusion point? So how can we build the foundation for them to get there? And for those who jump right away, how can we push them back and or shackle them for a short period of time and kind of keep them compartmentalized in terms of like seeing the details and establishing the rationale like we'd want them to do with close reading? Like what's the evidence that you find to support your conclusion? So this is a really powerful tool, and we would suggest you use it in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, and so just so you know, when you search for this on the Library of Congress website, it's downloadable as a PDF. You can have your students fill it out right there on the computer and send it to you, which is really handy in this remote learning environment. But also, if you go on the library's website for this, there is prompting questions for each of the observe, reflect, and question, depending on what media type you're analyzing. So there'll be different questions for a map or different questions for an audio. So that's what's really helpful for students. They can never get stuck, you know. So if we do a quick, go to the next slide, and we'll have a really quick mystery photo and show you kind of how we do this. It looks like we lost Keith. Let me share my screen real quick. And we'll just keep going. So here is a quick mystery photo. So we'll start with the C. What do you see going on?
I see children.
I see the number 8569. And this is a good time too for, you know, for younger students or ELL students that don't have the vocabulary, you know, have them get out of their seat and go and point to whatever they're talking about. Write it down in their own language, and then write it down in the English language, you know, so you can help build that vocabulary for them.
I see dark hair.
I see that they're sitting on the porch in a building, possibly.
Hmm.
Looks like some of the kids are like down on a lower level and some are on a higher level. But there's a building in the background, looks like.
I see straight faces.
It looks staged, you know, they're all together. They obviously were brought there for, I think anyway. So those are some good observations. It's hard sometimes not to move on to the next step, and as much as you can, hold on to that observations. But just for the sake of time, we'll move on to what do you think you know about this? Well, I think they're Native Americans by their faces and their hair color.
I think that they might be at some sort of school. This looks very much like a school photos I've seen in the past.
Oh, yeah. I think it looks cold. It looks like some of them are wearing like blankets. You know, a lot of clothes on.
They're less than delighted.
Mm. Yeah, so that next step too, what do you wonder about?
I wonder who brought them here. I wonder if they're, you know, if caregivers or parents dropped them off, you know, to what degree was the decision made for them to assemble.
Yeah, I wonder if they want to be there.
I wonder how long they've been waiting in terms of time. Like, when was this picture taken based on photographic, you know, technology? This could just be a really long, you know, family get together where you're all wait for it.
Yeah, and imagine too, if this is, you know, looking at this picture, it's probably really old. Imagine how long it would take to take a picture and get it, you know, clear and everything. So that's kind of how the primary source analysis tool works. It's, like I said, it's good to slow down, speed up, kind of play with it, see what your students really react to and how they help build these skills. What we want to focus on next is this levels of listening, and these come from a collection done by the current poet laureate Joy Harjo, and her mission this year is to collect Native American stories and poetry and pictures from around the nation to help tell their story. So what we're going to do now is this levels of listening, and I'm going to jump out just to show you.
Kyle, why don't I go ahead and share my screen real quick? We'll do that
Okay.
transition back.
Okay, go ahead.
It is here. Sorry for a little hiccup there. Okay, is that looking proper again?
Yeah, so this is Tanaya Winder, and she has this amazing poem called "Like Any Good Indian Woman." So before we start listening to that, though, Raleigh, let's go over this levels of listening kind of a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Let's set the stage for kind of developing a big picture of the levels of listening. Technically, according to us and the people we subscribe to in terms of research and beliefs, there are 5 levels of listening. And those 5 levels include discriminative listening, precise listening, strategic listening, critical listening, and appreciative listening. And if you can imagine, those levels of listening all together help us to make sense of what we hear. So for example, if you've ever said to a learner or a group of learners, listen carefully, and they just stop what they're doing and cross their hands and quit fidgeting and stare at you, they're acting like they're listening carefully, but we still don't know how they're listening. They know that to be careful listening. But what if you broke listening down into 5 levels? And those 5 levels were really kind of compartmentalized and allowed learners to go, oh, this type of listening. So if we said, I want you to listen appreciatively. I want you to listen for what ignites your emotion. I want to listen for you to listen for the power of words and things you resonate with or resonate with you. And I want you to listen for how the words or how the instruments or how the chimes sound. Imagine if you could tell them, listen like this, and they could go, okay, I'm going to do that. Then anytime we experience an auditory or recorded text and or source, we could tell them to listen in a particular way. So the value and the beauty of the listening levels is that when we tell kids to listen carefully, they actually can come back and say, how do you want me to listen? And we can teach them to navigate their world and the environment in meaningful ways to make greater sense of texts that are recorded.
Yeah, and just another quick point on the levels of listening is that we're using some pretty heavy sources right now, but I've also seen students just on their own or in a class do this with their favorite songs and see what they hear in their favorite songs that they've listened to 100 times already, but now they're honing in on discriminative listening or precise listening, and they're saying, I've never heard that note in this song before, or I didn't know there was this kind of drums in there, or I didn't realize that's what he was saying in the lyrics. So this is like just building on what Raleigh was saying. This is a really good way to kind of dig in as deep as you can into a particular text, if you will. So we'll go ahead and model the first level, which is discriminative. And we're going to listen to the first stanza of the poem. So how we're going to do this is we're going to go through each one of the stanzas. So there's 5 stanzas, 6 technically. So the last one will be 2 stanzas. But we're going to go through each one of the stanzas using each one of the levels. And I would encourage you to play with this system, whether you're going to go through each stanza like we're going to do, or go through one stanza 5 times through each of it, or go through the whole thing 5 times. So you can really kind of play with the process to see what works best for you and your learners. Before I start the audio for this first stanza, is there anything else you'd like to say, Keith or Raleigh? Okay, so here we go. This is what we're listening for. Discriminative listening. We're looking at identifying individual sounds, phonological awareness, vocal expression, onomatopoeia, nonverbal cue clues, things like that. So here's the first stanza.
Like any good Indian woman, I pull my brothers from words, stupid engine, shot like bullets. When people ask why my brothers hated school, I say, the spirit remembers what it's like to be left behind when America took children from homes, displaced family with rupture, ripping a child's hand from a mother's to put them in boarding school buildings. My brothers are mourning a loss they try to fix in finding home in another person.
So that's the first stanza. If we look at discriminative, what did you all notice?
Something that stuck out to me really quickly was the thing like shot like bullets, and using the phrase stupid engine, and you could creates a mental picture and sounds through those imageries.
Yeah, I notice strength in her voice, and prominent like S and SH or and sh sounds, kind of driving the point home, and buildings, particular words were enhanced over others as I listened discriminatively.
Yeah, I was
So,
too about the flow of the whole thing, where it was in and out and in and out. It really was like a crescendo and a decrescendo.
there was a lot of repeating of sounds like rupture, ripping, boarding school buildings, and brothers. So a lot of nice use of repeated sounds to drive those points.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go ahead and move on to that next stanza. So this is the second stanza, and we're going to use precise listening. So this is all about associating words and meanings. So putting things together, deducing the meaning of words from the context. What else is going on? Understanding grammatical structures. So how is she playing with grammar in her poetry to help bring forth her point? Recalling details, sequences. Are there multiple characters? Who's here? Who's she talking about? And then also following directions. So here is the second stanza.
I pull my brothers from cars named after Indians, Navajo, Cherokee, and Tacoma. On a danger-destined road, my brothers are born, longing for a way back from relocation and long walks across miles and miles and miles of removal. My brothers search for themselves in unhealthy addictions disguised as makeshift bandages.
So that's that second stanza. And you can see how when you start listening to each of these levels, like you want to go back and listen to it again and again and again to help pull out all of these different details.
Yeah. Some big things that stuck out to me were the historical connection to where she talks the long walks across miles and miles and miles of removal. And what that really speaks to me is talking about the things like the Trail of Tears that the Cherokee had to do in their removal from their land, and the drudgery of that, and then the strife and the death that occurred for those people when they were moved and relocated.
Yeah, those two words alone, relocation and removal, have very distinct connotations to them, right? You know, when we talk about removal, we're doing so with a purpose, and relocation, that brings about historical things like Japanese internment and other marginalizations of cultures.
Yeah, and with that, like those distinct words and the meanings behind them, makeshift bandages, addictions, the disguise, as well. You know, some repetition here that was helpful in making sense of the message.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the connections made with the cars named after Indians. I think that's something we all can, that we don't really think about, you know, when we drive a Jeep Cherokee, that where that name necessarily comes from cognizantly, or how that context might be taken by a person who's a Cherokee person, you know, person from the Cherokee Nation, and you know, and putting that in context, and recognizing, you know, making that connection to how that can be viewed in different contexts.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next level. And I really am excited to showcase this level of listening, the strategic level, because of its direct connection to strategic reading and the strategies that we teach readers day in and day out, and the processes we use, we model, we define, we showcase, and we practice together to help them, make sense of written text. Those same strategies can be used very purposefully to understand text that we hear and text that we listen to. So you're very familiar with these connecting ideas, differences between inferences and factual information, accommodation and assimilation of information, summarizing, predicting, questioning, synthesizing. The list goes on, but how can we use these elements to actually teach our learners to listen in a strategic way? So we're going to go ahead and listen again, and we can ask ourselves these questions to scaffold and support us as we listen to stanza 3 from this poem.
I pull my brothers from bottles they think answers might be hidden at the bottom of. My brothers stumble through back alleys looking for a love and laughter that was stolen from them like the land. And when their brown bodies try to find healing and love, other brown bodies cringe at their touch because, like any good Indian woman, our bodies are connected to an earth still being raped by the pipelines forcibly laid down inside all that we hold sacred. And my brothers hold on to their colonial emotional baggage so tightly they think it's gravity.
Yeah, so there's some big themes in there. Really trying to pull out some connections to some sort of factual information. I think there's connections to addiction that is a problem within the Native American communities, and I think that's a theme that she's really bringing up here. The Native American connection to the earth, but then also talking specifically about some of the instances where pipelines have been crossing their land, and there's connections to that. Yeah, so a couple of those things.
Yeah, the other connecting thing I was wondering about was when she said colonial emotional baggage. I'm wondering what kind of travel, she had mentioned cars before, and I'm wondering if there's like this theme of travel throughout.
It's certainly the underlying themes that are revealed through the particular terms and phrases that we identify is a huge part of this strategic listening level. And absolutely, that's when this is a time when you just celebrate your students' ability to answer or ask questions. Just what about this? What about this? What did this mean? What did she mean by this? And, to deny the need to actually go back to the written text to honor that is a gift to your students. So we would challenge you to not go there and just force them to keep going through this process for a strong purpose, and that's to listen strategically, but to also honor them and thinking, if they keep asking for the text, you're like, absolutely, this is how you teach readers to become readers, right? It is found in the text. So if we can go back to the text, we can actually pull those words apart and make sense of the whole text together on our own terms, which is what most authors would hope for us to do, right? Because they know we come from different places. So you hopefully can see how this strategic level of listening is nothing short of phenomenal. For you to even start here and connect it to what learners already know in terms of reading might be a really powerful place for you to begin. We're going to go ahead and jump forward, and we're going to move to the next level, which actually is kind of one of the main purposes for our teaching these days, for sure, because we want students to really be critical of us. We want students to be critical of their world. We want students to make decisions based on what's appropriate, what supports other people, so on and so forth. So when you consider critical level of listening, what's the bias associated with this? How do those inferences play into that bias and the hidden message that might be there, and or the blatant message? What is fact and opinion? And what's the true difference between fact and opinion? And what does fact and opinion have to do with bias? This is directly in line with historical thinking, and that's, what's the sourcing of this? Not only where did it come from, but who did it come from? Why did it come from them? At what point in time? What did it include? What's the layout? What's the look of this when you think of viewing levels? And, really understanding how a message, in particular, a recorded message, an auditory message, what does that say, or what does that tell you about power, privilege, marginalization, and the nature of our system of living with other people? So we're going to go ahead and practice this critical level of listening with the next stanza.
So I pull my brothers from oceans, believing they deserve the hurt so much they nearly drown themselves in it. And sometimes my brother's knife ancestral grieving onto their wrist slits to remember the only time we are ever red-skinned is when blood flows from the open wounds America knifed onto our brown skin. Self-love, apply pressure.
Initially I just thought, she knows, like, where's this message coming from? And it's when you think about this, when you open up this kind of Pandora's box of privilege, of marginalization, of discrimination, of history and experience, it may be setting the stage for emotional reactions from your learners. And we would encourage you to take that risk and to go there. But when you start thinking critically, you start thinking in terms of, like, how does this impact me? What impact does this have on other people? But I'm just thinking she knows, and she has personal experience with what she's actually saying. Guys?
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to say too. She feels like, I was looking at that critical question. How do you think the speaker came to believe this? And I think she's lived it. It feels like she's lived it. She knows it. Her whole life is it.
Yeah, I mean, she sees this through her community. An important thing that you can do here is going back and corroborating this. And luckily, this is created at the Library of Congress. This is part of a poetry collection that has information about who she is and where she comes from. And so you can actually trace that back and corroborate it with what life may be like where she lives and the people she lives with.
And speaking of, like poetic devices, who's the narrator? Who do you think the narrator is? Is it her?
That's where it gets fun, because you can look at the title. It says, like any good Indian woman. So she's talking on behalf of everyone, herself.
Yeah, it could be.
Could be.
If you think about teaching these levels of listening and what role or what purposes they might serve in your remote or face-to-face classroom, consider their connection to other teaching and learning experiences. Like right here, you have the perfect opportunity to really promote an inquiry-based set of learning experiences that, right on research skills. So no matter what level you teach, you can start with or you can complement that research process by digging into the listening level that is critical, as well as others. We're going to go ahead and jump forward into the next and the final level as far as our presentation goes. And that is the appreciative level of listening. The beauty of this is you kind of think of the title of this, and if you ever want to unpack these, the labels of these levels with your learners using something really powerful like the fourfold strategy, that might be really helpful for them to realize, okay, what does appreciative even mean? So we label this listening level, but they might not be able to get past what we even call it as appreciative, like what? So if they start to unpack it and you help them define it on their own terms, then maybe you really set the stage for identifying the characteristics that are associated with appreciative listening. So with appreciative, you might be misled to thinking this is like makes me feel good, or I like this. But the beauty of this, as you will see very quickly in our listening of the recording, it's not about positive mood, it's about mood. It's about feeling. It's about emotion. It's about reaction, the flow of words, the power of language, the forms that words and language can take. So we encourage you to practice this appreciative listening yourselves as we model it with the next portion of text.
I pull my brothers from ashes. America tried to burn us, not knowing we were already flame. And these will be the stories I tell my grandchildren when one day they ask me why being a good Indian woman means we burn like phoenix, repeatedly pulling our brothers.
Yeah, I mean, the power of language right there. The first thing that I kind of thought was the way she ended that was really powerful.
I really appreciate the mood that she evoked, because there was some really, really tough things that she addressed there. Addiction, marginalization, historical strife. But really, she pulls it back and says that no matter what they encounter, they're like phoenix. What is it? Burn like a phoenix, repeatedly pulling our brothers. So they have the power to pull themselves back out and move ahead, which I think is just that mood is a really nice way to wrap that poem up.
Yeah, I kind of was stricken by growing level of optimism and hope, in particular, just like you said, Keith, with tell my grandchildren. That means continuing the line. Like we're gonna keep going. Certainly, Phoenix in the sense that burning in flame and perseverance, so to speak, or whatever, and just repeatedly, like I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to quit. But this is a powerful opportunity right here to promote some questions for your learners, and wondering about the whole nature of the situation, and then circling back to other levels of listening and really bringing it all together. Kyle?
Yeah, I was thinking that same kind of thing. I think it would be good too to remind your students that I'm looking at this appreciative questions. Why do you think this audio was chosen? What can you relate it to? I'm thinking about students questioning your own choice of why you're going to use this audio and not another audio, for example. But also for them to take out this audio and relate it to something that they've already listened to, or that they see or feel or know, or whatever it is, to bring that extension into their own lives.
We'd encourage you to teach the level of listening in a wide variety of ways, and we're going to jump into some extensions in just a little bit. But before we get there, we want to promote a few key strategies in particular. And the one that we'd like to start with, in the essence of time, we're just going to kind of poke around this a little bit and hopefully inspire you and plant some seeds. But if you're not familiar with found poetry, it's nothing short of phenomenal, especially in the sense that we create space for our learners to make sense of a learning experience on their own terms, and they get to choose words and phrases. And this isn't bound by your ability and your skill to read an entire text or to read full sentences fluently or whatever. It's about grabbing words, pieces of the puzzle that make sense to us. So found poetry is essentially just picking those pieces of text, whether they're auditory or read through the writings that we encounter, and just putting them together in ways that showcase the meaning for us. So if you can imagine, this is a really powerful way for you to assess your learners and say, okay, show me what you can take out of this text using found poetry, or use found poetry and tell me why you used it, for example. Guys, do you have anything to add?
It's some key things here is there's a couple ways you can go about it. So you certainly could take the poem we just went through and make your own collage of it, so to speak. Or a strategy we've done that's kind of powerful is just use raw materials. So take a number of documents or other primary sources. I would suggest probably for this one, a nice thing to mix in with this poetry would be to grab a primary source set from the Library of Congress teachers page. For this one, we kind of leaned a little bit on a primary source set called Native American boarding schools, and so it's got a bunch of resources around that historical event. And so you could pull stuff from newspaper clippings and other things, and then break little clips of text from those and stitch them back into their own found poetry.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say, perhaps not in regards to found poetry, but levels of listening at least, that if you want like another good idea would be to give them the transcript halfway through or give it to them at the end, because now you can see the transcript and you can see that, you know, there's no capitalization, there's some interesting indents, you know, so now you can really bring out some more of the devices and things that the author is using.
Yeah, I'd really mess with that, the order of when you introduce the text, especially depending on, you know, the, you know, acceleration of your learner and or the striving nature of their situation in terms of written text. So absolutely. But, you know, as much as they just want the text, they're like, when are you going to give us the text? Then you want to just, you know, delay that possibly and just keep them coming along going, okay, no, listen, let's listen again. Let's listen again. We've tried this in a number of ways and actually listened to the same exact text 5 times with each level before we've introduced the actual written text. So we're going to jump forward. We're going to move to another strategy that we like to showcase, and that's sentence, phrase, word. And you may have used this in the past or you're familiar with it, but essentially it's a really powerful way for you to scaffold for your striving learners, attend to the needs of your accelerated learners, and to capitalize on time. So when you've got a text and you want them to just pull prominent pieces from the text, sentence, phrase, word might be your ticket.
Yeah, and this is another good one too, to do like in groups, in small groups or something, and pair it with like a discussion strategy, like save the last word for me or something, where students can each share their meaningful or moving sentence or whatever it is, so that they can gain a deeper understanding it through other students.
We better go ahead and jump forward so you can experience some of these strategies firsthand. We're going to go ahead and give you this primary source and kind of showcase for you the questions: what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder with respect to this primary source?
Now I see a bunch of, I think it's men, and they're all wearing suits of some sort.
I think it's important to note that all the suits appear to be the same or very similar. As well as most of their hairstyles are the same or very similar.
Yeah, and I don't know if we want to dwell on this too long, just for the meaning of time, and feel free to pause this video and look through it more, or go to the slide notes and see where this actually comes from. But I'll just leave it at that. So if we can go to the next slide, which is kind of another good quick activity that you could do, called Caption Writer. So here's another political cartoon around the same topic. Create a caption for just what you see. Create a caption for just what you think is happening, or create a caption for something that you wonder about. You know, so there's all different kind of ways that you can play with these activities that we're showing you.
Yeah, one thing to note with Caption Writer, it can be an amazing post-assessment or a benchmark assessment, a check for understanding as an exit slip or a ticket out at the end of a lesson or at the end of a unit. It doesn't have to be a paper or a project. It could be like you show a prominent primary source image and have your students create a caption that showcases a particular element that you needed them to understand, right? So create a caption for this in terms of colonialization, and then they need to showcase their understanding as such. It doesn't have to be a visual image like this. It could be an auditory text, and you can create a caption for that as well.
Yeah, caption writing is really about learning to write concisely and clearly, and understanding the power of words in just a few. Become a Hemingway, if it were.
Something I just want to point out as a side point here, and Kyle and Raleigh, you can come in, is that a lot of times when we're talking about historic documents, we do have to recognize that there are some stereotypes and problematic themes in these, which could be highly offensive today. And to be aware that you probably should have talks with your students before you delve into these sorts of things. The Library of Congress is full of things that are not appropriate today, but when using them in a historic context is an appropriate way to look at a viewpoint from history, and in a really important way to see the changes that have been made over time.
Well, and you think about the pilgrimage of privilege like we've gone through in part today, and that's really kind of delving into, how do we situate ourselves and others in our society, and to what degree do certain members of society have privilege or reward over others. Certainly these are challenging, as Keith had said, and not necessarily appropriate in terms of just presenting them today, but historically in terms of making sense of privilege, of demoralization and other aspects of our system and different contexts. This is highly appropriate because what does it do? It creates the space. So our job as teachers is to create space for that learning to occur, and safe space for people to take risks, for them to question, for them to make greater sense of what they see, hear, and read.
Yeah, and just thinking about that growing process of students, it goes right into our next slide of reflection. So really reflecting as not just as a teacher, but also as a student, through a learning process and through source analysis. How does it promote whatever learning objectives you're trying to get at? Did the student get that? The student can also ask those kind of questions of you. I don't see how this fit my, this learning objective that you gave us. Can you help me out and show me this? So the reflection part is really about digging that knowledge deeper into of your brain and allowing it to become part of you, kind of thing. So that next slide too, we got extensions. So here is some extensions, and I would challenge you too to come up with your own extensions. Hopefully you've been jotting down notes and thinking about different ways you can use sources or strategies or whatever, and adapting them for your own needs. Here's just a few examples. Picture books and primary sources are always a good one, especially with middle school and high school students. I was about to say elementary, but I feel like when we put in picture books to classrooms that don't normally have picture books, there's another level of engagement that begins. So the next slide here is some more extensions. Looks like remote learning extensions. So here's just some ideas that you can use in a remote learning environment. I encourage you to look at different ways you can plug in these sources to tech tools like Pear Deck, Flipgrid, things like that, Kahoot, whatever it is that your students use and engage most with.
Yeah, we'd just like to thank you again. They wanted us to remind you to fill out your
Survey.
The survey for their L13 pilgrimage of privileges there. Our contact information is there. I also just want to mention before we let you go that this presentation has some bonus material in it. So there's another reason for you to grab that link that was at the beginning and look through here. So we've actually tackled some other areas that you could do these methods: Boston Massacre, Sand Creek Massacre, slave narratives, women's suffrage, some civil rights issues, Japanese internment, and then some other resources like the TPS Teachers Network, and then some other things from the LOC. But again, we'd just like to thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned, here's our contact information. If you'd like to learn more about teaching with primary sources or anything that you saw here today, or again, if you're interested in pursuing a grant with us or would just like to hear more about that, like I said, we are here to help with that sort of information.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. We encourage you to embark on your own pilgrimage of privilege.